I'm Roger Boren, and I'm here on this day with Justice, Presiding Justice Robert Mallano. And we're doing an oral history legacy recording on this day, which is a day in May in 2021. And because of the current and still continuing pandemic conditions here in California and elsewhere, we're doing this remotely. And so the recording persons and the Justice Mallano and I are all in separate locations, and we're doing this by electronic means. Justice Mallano, you and I have known each other for about 20 years or so personally, known each other perhaps a little longer than that historically. And it's an honor to be here with you today and to attempt this interview in a way that will capture your legal and judicial history. Can we start with your youth, perhaps, and talk about? Go ahead and tell us about that.
Well, I grew up in Los Angeles, about 15 miles from where I sit right now in Southwest Los Angeles. I went to a boys' high school, Mount Carmel High School, and then I went east to college.
Well, let's go back on that and take it in steps. What was your life like as a young boy in Southern California in those years that must have been time of World War II and maybe some of that after? What sticks in your mind about the conditions or events and your feelings about the 1940s?
Well,
what was your life like?
The first thing that sticks in my mind is from my first recollections when I was 3 years old. My father was afraid of a Japanese invasion in 1941 following Pearl Harbor and shipped my mother and brother and I off to Chicago for 6 months, far away from the West Coast, where I lived. So that was the first thing. And I can remember being terrified coming home 6 months later because we were going through the Great Salt Lake on the train, and all the way around all I could see is water. I guess the train tracks cut across part of the Salt Lake. But anyway, I got home when I was 3 years old, went to grammar school when the war was going on. They were selling war bonds. Meat was rationed. A lot of stuff was rationed. Shoes were rationed. Cars were rationed. When the local market across the street from my grammar school got bubble gum once a month, that was a big deal. We'd go in line and get bubble gum. So, and I remember the war ending, and yeah, it was a happy childhood. I lived in.
Well, what did you do for fun on a daily basis when you were a young man?
What was that? I'm sorry.
Well, what did you do for fun as a young boy?
Well, what did we do? You know, we played.
You ride bikes?
We rode bikes. We played football in the street, baseball in the street, baseball on empty lots. Went up to the local high school and played. And I started a bug club. We catch bugs. I loved to catch. You know how to catch a trapdoor spider? You open the trap and pour water down, then you twist the top and pull it out. Anyway, so it was a normal school sports, bugs.
Did some of the playmates that you had there as a young boy, some of those become your classmates when you were in high school at Mount Carmel?
My closest friend was Bruce, and he moved away, broke my heart when he was 7. And I was in love with the girl next door when I was 5, Jeannie, and she moved away. And none of my immediate neighbors went to Mount Carmel. I went. I mean, some where I went to a lot of them where I went to grammar school went to Mount Carmel, but not in my immediate neighborhood.
Have you changed? Go ahead.
Used to hitchhike going to school until I got a ticket for hitchhiking. And my mother had to go down to see the juvenile officer with me, and he said, "Don't let him hitchhike. It's not safe. There's bad people out there." So then she gave me bus money, and I got to take the bus. which was better because I wasn't late for first period, as it often was when I was hitchhiking.
Tell me about Mount Carmel High School. Has that been a relationship that has extended through your life?
Well, my brother went to a public high school, so I went to Mount Carmel with some of my colleagues, and it was an all-boys Catholic school, a Carmelite school. And if you wanted to be anything, you're either on the football team or the basketball team, and that's just the way it was. So I was on the football team, and we had great basketball teams. They won the league often, and we won our league finally in football our senior year. But that was basically what high school was about. Also, high school dances. The priests made you go to the high school dances, and the nuns from the neighboring Catholic school made the girls go there because they wanted Catholic boys and Catholic girls to marry in their faith. So I met my wife at a freshman dance. My wife of
as a high school freshman.
57 years. I met her at a freshman dance at my high school.
Wow. Well, with that, you ended up getting your bachelor's degree from Yale University in 1960. What led you to the other side of the United States, to Yale?
Well, the football coach at Yale, the back coach, called my coach and wanted to know if anybody on any of the players on his team had the grades to get into Yale. And my high school coach said, yeah, name me. So coach came by my house and told me about Yale and told me he was Italian. I'm Italian ancestry. He told me about 40% of New Haven, Connecticut, where Yale is Italian, and gave me that pitch. And so I applied and I got in. I got a scholarship, an academic scholarship, called a financial aid scholarship. They do not give athletic scholarships in the Ivy League to this day, and they didn't then. So it was a financial aid scholarship. So that's how I ended up back there.
And then you played intercollegiate football at Yale then?
I did, yes.
Any highlights from that period?
Well, today I haven't forgotten this day. I can live it over my mind like it happened yesterday. We were on our own 45-yard line. I intercepted a pass and ran it back 55 yards for a touchdown. I was a guard then, but so that was kind of unique. So that was kind of the highlight of my football career.
I have to ask you this: did you win the game?
No, that my touchdown put us ahead.
Sorry.
Touchdown put us ahead, but they came back and won.
You remember who you were playing?
Brown.
Is that in Rhode Island? I think it is.
Yes, it is. Providence, Rhode Island. Yes.
Okay. Any other highlights that stand out from Yale University? I guess I should ask you, what did you major in?
History.
Oh.
It was a big cultural shock going back there. You know, I heard people talk about the change of seasons and everything. And, there's no change of season in Los Angeles. Everything's the same. So I went back there, and we were sophomores flying to upstate New York to Ithaca to play Cornell. And I'm on this bus. We got off the airplane. I'm on this bus going to Ithaca. And I'm looking at these trees, and they're red. They're orange, they're yellow. My first thought was, who painted those trees? I mean, I never seen that. So then I figured out, nobody could paint the trees. That's just the way they were. And it was the most magnificent sight I've seen in my life. I was 19 years old at the time, and I never had any idea of the beauty of those, the fall colors. So it was a big cultural shock going from LA back to Yale with all the prep guys and dressing very preppy. I dressed like we dressed in high school in LA, which is peg pants and, gaucho shirts. And so it took me a little while to get acclimatized to the New England culture. But by the time I was a sophomore, I was wearing button-down shirts and khaki pants with the buckle in the back and penny loafers and sweat socks. So,
have you still maintained some connections to your classmates or to the school?
A couple of guys I see. My best friend from there died 5 years ago, but there's a couple of guys I keep in touch with. And I try to make all the reunions. Our 60th reunion got called off. So
Well, you graduated from law school at the University of California, Berkeley, Bolt Hall, in 1963. When did you first contemplate pursuing a legal career?
When I was in high school watching Perry Mason, I was intrigued by Perry Mason, and I said, I want to be a lawyer just like Perry Mason. So I had that in my mind all the way through high school, and at Yale, that was my goal, to be a lawyer.
Okay, so you had that by the time you got to law school. It was not a short time target. It was a one you had in mind an earlier time.
Yep.
Had you any thoughts while attending Bolt Hall that you might someday have a judicial career as well?
Well, I always looked up to judges. I thought it was a honorable profession and some a career that I thought would be terrific, but I really didn't have that in mind when I was in law school, because I thought that the process, I understand, is you got a judicial appointment from a governor someday after you practice law for a while. So that wasn't on the radar for me when I was at Bolt Hall.
As you were growing up in Southern California, had you known personally any judges?
There was one classmate whose father became a judge, but that was when I was in high school, and I had never met him. So, I mean, I never. Oh, wait a minute. Let me back up. When I was in high school, they had something they called Boys' Day, where a boy, if you will, got to take over a role of somebody, okay, in government or whatever. A friend of mine, he got to be a police lieutenant, and I thought, oh, lucky him. He gets to ride around a cop car. The slip they wrote down for me was presiding justice of the criminal courts. Well, I can't go sit in the mayor's desk and get my picture taken, so I just don't know what's going to happen. So I go down to Department 100, which is the master calendar for the county, and I go up to the clerk and say, I'm Royce State, blah, blah. So the judge...
That's the biggest courtroom in L.A., isn't it?
So the judge was Herbert V. Walker, and he puts a chair next to him on the bench and says, sit up here with me. And I'm sitting there listening to him, and he's arraigning some big criminal case, Ewing J. Scott, who was charged with murdering his wife, and they theorized that she's under the Hollywood freeway someplace under tons of cement. And so I'm watching him, and he's chewing out this lawyer. He leans over to me and says, he's a new public defender. I chew him out because it's good for him. They got to learn. He said that. So anyway, he says, well, I'm sorry I can't take you to lunch because I have a commitment, but I've arranged for another judge, Louis Burke, to take you to lunch. And Louis Burke at that time was on the Superior Court, and he went on to be on the California Supreme Court. Very respected, very well-known guy. So I talked to him but at lunchtime, I said, that case looks real exciting you're trying. It was some automobile case. He said, no, it's really boring. So I learned a couple lessons from that. But anyway, those are my two experiences with judges. And they were both real positive, and they're both very, very nice gentlemen. They treated me very nice, and I appreciated it.
Well, your first few years as an attorney was not with a criminal law firm. That was with Paul Hastings, wasn't it?
Can I back up just a little bit, because you're
Sure.
leaving out the year of Italy.
Okay.
When Bolt Hall.
I forgot about that. Yes, I needed to ask about that.
Bolt Hall had a Ford grant that promoted international legal studies, and they gave scholarships out, or they call them fellowships. And I wanted one just because I wanted to travel and go study someplace. So I went to talk to a professor who I really liked about it, and I said, well, maybe I'll go to Venezuela or something. I said, what I just threw this out just to say something as an introduction. What I really like to do is go to Rome and study canon law. He says, what? Canon law? That's law and the internal laws of a church. Okay. He says, well, why don't you do that? He said, did you know that a rich Anglican died and left a lot of money for a canon law collection, and Bolt Hall has one of the best canon law collections in the United States, and you're the only person that showed any interest in it? Wow. So I applied for that to study canon law in Rome, and through a classmate of mine, put me in touch with a Dominican who arranged for me to be tutored at the Dominican University in Rome in canon law. And also, the school put me in touch with the head of international comparative law at the University of Rome. So I was in a seminar at the University of Rome, and then I was going to Angelicum, which is right across the street from the Forum, and I did that for a year. Now, in the meantime, I graduated, got married, took the bar, so I was over there with my wife, and we had a baby over there, as a matter of fact. Our first child was born in Rome.
No, he wasn't born in the United States.
So when I was over there, I got an offer from a law firm who I'd interviewed, and then when I got back, I went to work for them. They were a big. Then I was the 14th lawyer. It's Paul Hastings, Janowski, and Walker. Now they probably have over 1,000 lawyers, but I was the 14th on overhead. And then they were just in LA. Now they're multinational. So I did that.
Where was their office? Yeah.
Downtown LA on Spring Street.
Okay.
Maybe
so you began your legal career on Spring Street and ended your judicial career on Spring Street.
That's right. It was 2 blocks down from the Ronald Reagan building where you and I sat. But anyway,
yeah,
I did that, and I was scheduled to be a corporate lawyer, which really was dreadfully boring for me. So I told my father-in-law, boy, if I could do anything I'd want, I'd quit and go in the DA's office. He says, well, why don't you? I said, I got to take a pay cut, blah, blah. So anyway, I took a pay cut from $10,000 to $7,000 to join the DA's office because I really wanted to do courtroom work. And the idea of criminal appealed to me, and going back to watching Perry Mason. So I did that, and I was in the DA's office 3.5 years. And after 3.5 years, I tried I don't know how many jury trials, and I decided to advance in the DA's office. You become you don't try a case anymore. You become a civil service administrator, filling out forms. And I didn't want to be a civil service administrator. So I went into private practice on my own. And I was in private practice for 9 years before I was appointed to the bench by Jerry Brown in 1978.
Let me ask you a little bit. Is there, your chance to do criminal law there in the DA's office as a prosecutor rather than as a Perry Mason defense lawyer? Is there anything that stands out in your mind about that part of your career?
I enjoyed being a prosecutor very much. I loved the esprit de corps of our office. Made some good friends there. And I enjoyed doing criminal law as well. And I did criminal law and family law. And that's how I made a living. I started with a small firm, and they didn't want to do divorces anymore. They didn't do any criminal law. So I took over the criminal law practice. And then I was with them for 7 years. Then I went out my own, doing the same thing for a couple of years. But it was a enjoyable time. I enjoyed the practice of law.
When you were serving in the DA's office, did you serve downtown, or did you get to work in one of the regional offices out where you grew up?
Well, I ended up working myself back to Torrance, which is about 5 miles from my house. Before that, I was on the county run, which meant first I was doing prelims in the old Hall of Justice downtown. Then I was on the county run. They send you all over the county. Then we had to be in child support in the old Hall of Records, which they tore down for 4 months. And then I wangled my way back to Torrance, close to home, where I spent the last 2.5 years. And then when I went to private practice, it was about a mile away from the Torrance courthouse.
So you got to stay in your own home backyard.
No, I knew the lawyers. Yeah, it was fun to practice in the smaller community. You know the lawyers, and people were more respectful to each other then, and not the kind of nastiness I've seen to happen later on. I mean, you got to see the guy or the woman all the time. You tend to be more civil.
Your practice there, in both with the partnership and then when you were in solo practice, consisted of kind of a general practice of both criminal and civil kind of cases?
Well, pretty much all criminal law and family law. Okay, that was pretty
Okay,
much.
family law. Okay.
When I
What
went on
steered
the,
you toward?
pardon me.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish.
When I went on the bench, I had about 50 open family law cases.
Wow,
So that
that's a
was
lot
about
of cases.
a third of my practice.
Okay. That's that's those are kind of disagreeable situations a lot of times. Were they for you?
I missed the question, Roger.
Well, those often are very, they're people that are not happy about life when
Well,
they come to you.
they're it's very stressful to go through a divorce. I urged every client I had to go to a marriage counselor. They'd say, "Well, I can't fix the marriage." I said, "Well, go to a counselor that can help you understand what you're going through and how stressful this is for you, and how stressful it is for your children, and it's just good for your mental health." So I tried to. I said I'm not a trained marriage counselor, but these are tough things you're going through. So I tried to understand their predicament. And some clients are really, really unhappy about life, and it's understandable. But I tried to be as kind and as empathetic as I could be.
What steered you into becoming a trial judge?
Well, every young lawyer goes to court and sees the judge up there and says, "Well, I could do that. I could do that as well or better than him or her." you think you
Plus,
think
you're more in charge of your own destiny too.
well, then so that but going about it is getting into something else.
Yeah. Well, how did you go about it?
Well, I took Pat Brown's judicial appointment secretary out to lunch. He had offered me a job when I was at Bolt Hall. He went to Bolt Hall. And then I said, "Well, what appealed to you in becoming when you were rating these people and advising Pat Brown or something?" And he told me how Pat Brown did it. So I tried to do that. And of course, Jerry Brown had his own ideas. So doing it the Pat Brown way didn't do it. Okay, it did not do it. So Jerry Brown had his own thoughts about who should become a judge. So the minority bars were very, very active, and so I was one of the original members of the Italian American Lawyers of Los Angeles, which were organized for the sole purpose of lobbying for judicial appointments. And Judge Mario Klinko was very outspoken about it and would talk to Jerry Brown and when are you going to appoint some Italians? When are you going to appoint some Italians? Look at this guy. Look at this guy's resume. And Jerry Brown went to Cal undergraduate, Yale Law School. I was reverse, and so look at this guy. So I was appointed the day before the Italian American lawyers had a dinner for Brown. Maybe 300 people there at the Italian Cultural Center downtown. The appointment secretary, when he called me and said, "It's just a coincidence that you're getting appointed the day before, that Brown's going to be down there." I said, "Well, I'm sure that, okay, whatever you say, basically." So that's how I got the appointment. And a recommendation of the Superior Court Judge, Muni Court Judge George Perkovich, who got elevated, and he recommended me for his spot on the South Bay Municipal Court in Torrance. So those two things did it for me.
And you again got to go to work in your home background area.
That's right. I'm in the building where I was in the DA's office where I did most of my divorce work and a lot of my criminal work. So it was just 5 miles from my house, and it was great.
Well, you must have got yourself into Jerry Brown's mind because you're only there for 2 years, right?
Well, yeah, it's kind of like the pride of authorship, I guess, because the legislature gave LA 25 new judges. Okay, so there are all these vacancies. So I contacted the appointment secretary, Tony Klein, who's our colleague up in San Francisco, and said, "Could I be considered?" He says, "Yes." So I got one of the 25.
Okay. Well, then you went to the Superior Court, and where did you practice
Well,
being a judge?
They sent me first to Compton, which was about not too far from my house, about a 35-minute ride. I was there for 2 years. Then I went to Long Beach, which was about the same drive. And then I worked my way back to Torrance, where I really wanted to be, because that was my home turf. And then Judge Bob Wenke, he's no longer with us, God bless Bob. I sat with him in Long Beach, and he kept nagging me to go downtown and run for presiding judge. And he says, I think you can be presiding judge. And it's by election, of course. So I said, well, I want to go back to Torrance first and maybe become supervising judge there and then get a little gray in my hair. So I was out in Torrance for 5 years or so. And then I went downtown in a civil courthouse with the idea of, in a couple of years, running for a presiding judge.
Was there anything that prompted you to run for presiding judge besides Bob Wenke or somebody like that, just urging that you'd make a good candidate?
Well, I was interested in court administration. It just, in the back of my mind growing up, I wanted to go into politics. Okay, I remember the priest saying, he was from Chicago. You go into politics, you'll lose your soul. And for a while before I became a judge, I thought of running for the assembly and this and that. And then it's such a dreadful life on the family, from what I understood. And then but the idea of being presiding judge, you're the spokesperson for the court, you interact with the Board of Supervisors and legislature, it was gives me some of the political activity that I kind of thought I'd enjoy.
And so you did run for presiding judge and became one in 1993 to 94, right?
That's right.
And were there certain challenges that faced the presiding judge of the Los Angeles Superior Court?
Well, they kind of say
that particular time.
Well, being just in general, being presiding judge is like herding cats, as they say. They're all state constitutional officers, so you really can't tell them to do anything. You just try to appeal to their better nature, and most of them have a better nature. And well, the one thing that was going on when I was presiding judge was the Oj Simpson case, and that was getting a whole lot of court attention, So,
you remember one of the things that happened there about the where the place that trial would be conducted?
Oh yeah, well this is Garcetti.
He was the DA.
Deputy District Garcetti, not the father of the mayor of Los Angeles now, got blamed for the case being tried downtown and not trying it as a preliminary hearing in Santa Monica, and then to the Superior Court in Santa Monica. Well, I'm the presiding judge, and basically, the Santa Monica was an unsafe courthouse.
Sure was.
Ruined by the big earthquake. People had escaped by breaking through the walls, not a setup of security. They had to bring the defendants down the hallway, and the supervising judge out there says, this isn't the place to try OJ for safety reasons. Okay, so the court, not Garcia, the court decided to try it downtown, and it got tried downtown. Now, typically what happened in the past was all the big murder cases were tried downtown because they'd go to the grand jury, and any indictment returned by the grand jury is done in the Department 100 downtown. So there wasn't anything unusual about a big case, but Garcetti got blamed for it being tried downtown, and I've seen books written that says it's his fault, he chose to write it downtown. I had a reporter call me once and ask me about it, and I said it wasn't his decision, it was the court's decision. And the reporter did not report that, did not clear up, because it seems like he wanted to blame Garcetti, and he couldn't blame Garcetti, so he didn't say anything about it. So,
yeah. Well, were there any other situations? As I recall, there was something about the time that you became presiding judge that the integrity of the judge situation in downtown was being challenged by local newspapers and things like that because of things. I don't remember exactly what it was about. Do you remember that?
The integrity? No,
Yeah.
I don't. Well, there was one thing. There was an op-ed piece in the LA Times that says Los Angeles Superior Court, an apartheid court, written by a criminal lawyer. And it basically said it was apartheid court because Governor Wilson had appointed 21 Superior Court judges in LA County, and none of them was an African American. So I took it upon myself to say in speeches, including one where the Supreme Court was there, the LA County Party judges deal, saying that the court ought to be culturally diverse. You want people to buy into the court system. They can't be looking up at just all white faces, you know. So then I got a call from somebody on the governor's secret committee that said, "Well, who do you want the governor to appoint?" I said, "I don't have anybody in mind. I just thought that, you know, out of 21, he ought to pick an African American. There was about 8 or 10% of the population, and there's qualified. It says, well, give us a name, you know." So okay. So now it became upon me. So I went through all the commissioners on our court, and one of them was a standout. He was a mathematics major at UCLA, and very highly respected and highly regarded. And I said, this guy. So, and the guy I'm talking, oh yeah, I appeared in front of him. He's a good guy. So I called him up and said, I want you to apply. And, yeah, you know, he didn't think he had a chance. I said, would you please apply? He applied and he got appointed. So I feel good about that because he was a good commissioner, and he turned out to be a very fine Superior Court judge. So that was a contentious thing. Now, amongst the judges, there were two other things that were very, very contentious. One of them was the merger of the Superior Court Municipal Court, and the other one was state.
Well, that was a little later. I believe.
Yeah, that was when I was presiding judge, they asked the Superior Court Exec Committee wanted to vote to see who was in favor of it and who was against it. Okay, so that was on my watch, and it was 160 something against it, 33 for it. I was one of the 33 for it. So Senator Lockyer, who was the head of the Senate, was pushing for it. So I figured to do the right thing, I should hand deliver the letter, okay, rather than send it to. So I went up to his office and said, here's the vote, just to give it to him. Kind of, I thought that was the right thing to do. Anyway, so it eventually got forced on the Superior Court after I was presiding judge. It happened maybe 5 years after I was presiding judge.
Oh, I see. They
finally unified, and then the other thing was state court funding, which happened while I was on the Judicial Council with you after I was presiding judge. But that was a very contentious issue.
Well, we kind of maybe turn the focus a little bit towards the Court of Appeal, the Second Appellate District here in Los Angeles. I believe Mildred Lilly was the administrative presiding justice.
She was.
And I was wondering if you might tell us a little bit about your experiences with her as you were presiding judge of this LA Superior Court, because I know that you had to have some exchanges there to have cooperation.
Well, she would call up and say, Mallano, first time, I need somebody in the Court of Appeal. Are you going to give me a bad time? I said, no. Who do you want? Well, I don't. Give me somebody. Okay, so I cooperated with her. Unlike when I was on the Court of Appeal, we had 2 vacancies in the 4-justice department, and the LA Superior Court presiding judge says, no, we can't give you anybody. So I went to Orange.
I remember that well.
Orange County. So anyway, so Mildred, whatever, you know, but I love Mildred, you know, I loved her. As you recall, I had her speak for me when I was my first confirmation hearing. And she was, one time she came in with a black eye, and I said, would you fall off a bar stool? And she said, don't I wish? I don't know. She bumped her eye at home or something. But anyway, she was something else. I mean, she told me this story. I love this story. She
She
graduated
always
from
had a story of the week.
one story.
She always had a new story of the week. Well, tell us this story.
Well, she said she went to Earl Warren when she graduated from Bolt back in the late 30s, and she wanted a job he was the DA of Alameda County. And he says she interviewed for a job. He said, "No, we hired a woman once and it didn't work out." Okay. So later on, the irony is when she was like she was the first woman appointed to the municipal court in the state. Earl Warren swore in. So she got her. I don't want to say her. She got the last laugh in there. But anyway, Mildred was a lovely woman. I love Mildred.
She used to embellish that story a little. I mean, not embellish it, amplify that story by saying that later in life she went back to probably an ABA convention back east and took the time to get herself admitted to the bar of this U.S. Supreme Court, and Earl Warren gave her kind of a special applause, you might say, in introducing her in the courtroom. She was very proud of that.
Yes, she was.
Didn't you and she sort of establish a policy that was followed thereafter because I think before you were presiding justice, the Court of Appeal used to just work through the Judicial Council of the Chief Justice, and they were calling up people from the Superior Court without even interfacing the leaders of the court, the Superior Court.
I don't
Didn't you and Mildred sort of iron that out?
I don't recall that, Roger, but I just remember she asking me, and I said, you need anybody, let me know. I always thought it was
I think she told me that she had that arrangement.
Okay.
And I think that came about because of your ability to converse with her and to work out an amicable way of doing things that made more sense, rather. Because when I was called up as a pro tem justice, they were still doing that. I mean, the supervising judge was even right. You're going there as a Court of Appeal pro tem, that it changed the workload.
Well, my way of getting along with amicably is just doing whatever she asked for.
That was always a good thing. That was always a good thing with Mildred.
Which is always reasonable, so I didn't have any problem with that. Yeah. Well, don't leave off me about my being the man that came to dinner in your division. You invited me.
That's where I was going next, but I was going to mention that it was about this time that you were still presiding judge that you started serving on the California Judicial Council. Is that correct? Right. Yeah, and that's when we served together. And who was the Chief Justice when you first went on the California Judicial Council?
It was Malcolm Lucas.
Right. And then I think while you were still there, Ron George became the Chief Justice of California.
I sat next to him at a lot of Judicial Council meetings, so he was on the.
Yeah.
He hadn't been appointed to the as Chief Justice, I think, until I think I was off the Judicial Council. It was a 3-year term.
Yeah. Okay, I think I stayed on while he still was the Chief Justice. Do you remember the thing about the budget woes that we had at about that time in the California judiciary?
Well, the contentious issue, you mean about the budget business now?
Yeah, how we got. We had a problem with the legislature, the judiciary did.
Well,
the
legislature decided there ought to be a trial court budget commission to allocate the funds, and somehow I ended up being this is for all the state. Somehow I ended up being the chairperson of the state court budget commission that was established by the legislature, and all the courts would get together and want their piece of the budget, and we were supposed to distribute it. And we were trying to, all the courts had different budgets, different accounting systems. So the first thing we had to do is to get everybody reporting in the same way and using the same, budgetary structure. And that was a big problem just to get that done. And then we ended up allocating the funds pretty much as they were historically. So that was a lot of work, and I'm not sure what we achieved. Although I think it was a healthy thing because we could get together and discuss our needs and figure out a framework to voice them to the rest of the Judicial Council, and so the legislature would, be apprised of our situation.
That right around that same time, that was part of that push by the legislature for unification and a lot of other things, and so the budget thing was kind of a step toward that.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. That's right. Unification, state funding, there were big sea changes in the California infrastructure.
And there'd been also kind of gulf created between the judiciary and the legislature because of some things that happened with, I think it might have been term limits or something, as I recall. And
what happened?
Go ahead.
What happened between the legislature and the courts was the ruling on the limits, judicial legislative term limits.
Right.
The opinion in that opinion offended a lot of legislators. Okay, and it kind of caused a rift, if you will.
I know. Well, there was a period of rough months for about 5 years after that.
Yeah, but then they all got termed out eventually. So the ones that came in there got the benefit of the term limits. So anyway.
So let's go to the thing that you after your term as presiding judge was over, you came to the Court of Appeal, and I was the beneficiary of that because you served on the division where I served. And
you asked me to come down there.
Yeah.
And I had a direct calendar court in Torrance. I had all these cases, so I called the presiding judge of LA Superior Court and said, "Could you send somebody out here to take my spot?" And he said, "I don't have anybody. You got to get somebody yourself." So I called the LA Municipal Court. Does anybody want to sit in assignment in Superior Court Torrance? No. I called the PJ of the South Bay Municipal Court. No. So I became very frustrated, and I called the Bill Vickery, and he was out, and I left a message with the secretary. How come so-and-so who was on the media court can sit in the Court of Appeal for a couple of years, and I can't go down there because they can't get by to replace me. So that afternoon, I got a call back from the secretary and said, an assigned judge will be to your courtroom. So then you asked me to come down for 90 days. I came down for 90 days, like the man that came to dinner. I stayed another 90 days. I stayed another 90 days. I stayed another 90 days. Not another 90, another 90. I was there.
You just couldn't get rid of you.
I wouldn't leave. You couldn't get rid of me. And I must confess that I'm grateful for you, for the training you gave me and everything you taught me, because it
worked two ways. You were kind of born to be an appellate justice.
Well, I don't know, but anyway, it's a different animal being in the trial court and being on the Court of Appeal. And I must confess, I didn't want to embarrass myself. I was working 7 days a week. I'd go to the library, on the local library, on Saturday and Sunday.
You didn't have a staff person, did you? We didn't give you a staff, did we?
The first 3 months, I did not have a staff. I wrote everything from scratch myself, and that's when I was getting in the process. And then our dear friend, my dear friend Mario Fukudo, retired, and then I took over his staff. But it's good. I started working real hard. Then I got familiar with the procedure and everything, and then, like any job, it gets easier once you learn it. But I stayed there a year and 9 months, and then I got appointed to Division I. And I remember when the appointment secretary guy said, "Gee, can I stay in Division II? I really like it there." I said, "No, you got to go over there." He says, "There's we need another man over there. You'll be the second man. There's 2 women. It's like Noah's Ark, they got to have equal number of males and females." I said, "Okay." I wasn't going to argue with him. So I went over to Division I and left you, but we weren't that far.
What was that like? That division had a sort of a history and a public.
Well, let me just say this. You might not get this. The public might not get this later, but my predecessor described our division as the Branch Davidian division. The Branch Davidians being the group that they ended up killing each other, getting killed, or whatever. So there was kind of internecine warfare there. I don't want to get any difficulties. So, but
well, things calmed down when you got there, didn't they? I thought they did.
I got along very well with Vano Spencer. She was the first black woman appointed to the bench in the state of California. She was lovely. She's very kind to me, very gracious and beautiful. I mean, she was, 30 years my senior, but I enjoyed working with her. I had a very good relationship with her, and so I enjoyed her very much. And she wanted me to succeed her as presiding justice, and she got her wish.
Yeah, I remember that very clearly. You'd been appointed to the trial courts by Jerry Brown, and Gray Davis appointed you to Division I. And then when you became presiding justice for the first time, you had a Republican governor appoint you to the presiding justice position.
Yeah, that was a surprise to a lot of people, but
yeah,
it's
So let's just get the dates in there. You became an associate justice on Division I in August of 2000. You became presiding justice of that division in June of 2008, as I have it here.
If I can digress a little bit,
yeah.
Before I was appointed to the presiding justice by Governor Schwarzenegger, I was in a funeral for the father of our court clerk on the Court of Appeal. And my phone started buzzing. I had the ringer off, so. And the priest was in the eulogy talking about the decedent's fishing trips or whatnot. I wasn't going to get out and answer the phone. I could see it was my college roommate who lives in Washington, D.C. So I after the funeral, I called him back, and I couldn't get a hold of him. And he called me that afternoon. He said, when I called you, I was sitting next to Arnold Schwarzenegger at a luncheon at the Shriver House. My roommate is a neighbor of Shriver's. And I remember something about you wanted to be I want an elevation, I want some kind of judgeship. You still want that? And he says, well, I told Arnold, he called him Arnold. He claims to have introduced Arnold to Maria Shriver at the Special Olympics. Okay, my roommate was a Davis Cup captain, was involved in the Special Olympics. Anyway, so Schwarzenegger said, well, listen, if he's interested, you call this guy. I'll give you his name. This name doesn't get out to the public, and tell him about it. So, and then later I got the appointment. So there you are.
Well, much appreciated appointment too. One of the I'd like to go back and just looking at your Court of Appeal career as a whole. Is there anything that stands out in your mind about the cases that you wrote, or anything that particularly? I mean, if you look at the list of hundreds of cases that you did, they're every kind I could think of that the Court of Appeal handles. But is there anything that stands out in your mind about a case or a series of cases that you handled that you felt were particularly important?
Not one particularly, Roger. I was asked that question when I retired about what I'm proud of writing, and I told him the a Mallano Bob on a llama. Okay, if you write Mallano Bob on a llama forward and backwards, It's the same. It's a palindrome. So that's the writing I'm most proud of, that palindrome.
Well, you know what? I have to say this, even though I'm not the one being interviewed, is that when you were a pro tem justice on our Division 2, one of the things that stood out in my mind was that you will always spoke your mind in the most collegial way, even if it was completely at odds with what the other two members of a panel of justices might be wanting to do. And as a pro tem justice, you never were a yes man. You were always somebody who had the highest integrity. And I always felt that was really important to the Court of Appeal to have somebody like you there. And that proved to be true, I think, throughout your whole career.
Well, thank you, Roger.
Now, your career wasn't over, at least concerning judges, when you retired in February of 2014, was it?
No, because of
And
my
it
father.
and it wasn't because you went into private judging or anything, because you did not.
No, I did
What
not
did
go
you
into
do?
private. No, I'm not my cup of tea.
What was your cup of tea?
Well,
I'm talking about the Mallano lawsuit, of course.
yeah,
You
well,
know.
I filed a class action lawsuit. I was a class action plaintiff on behalf of every judge in the state and every retired person in the state for back pay and back pension benefits. And
What got you to do that?
well, okay, in November of 2013, got a letter from all judges. Got a letter from Steve Jar, my good friend, the head of the AOC and the president of the California Judge Association, that said, effective July 2013, we're going to start paying you a salary based on the raises that state employees got in 2008 through 2013. Okay. So what happened was this. The law states that judges' pay is raised every year based on the average raise of state employees. In 2008, the state employees got 0.97% raise. Judges didn't get that. They got it in 2013. Well, the question is, what happened if the pay should have been higher in 08? It should pay us from 08, not start in 2013. But the finance department said, oh, that's not fair or something. So, and I couldn't see how, if they recognize that we're entitled to it, that we shouldn't have it for those 5 years. So I called Steve Jar. I wanted to give him a heads up and said, Steve, I'm about to write the state controller Chang and demand back pay, but I wanted to give him a chance to say, don't do it. We're going to take care of it or whatever. And also, so he'd have a heads up so he could, if he wanted to tell the Chief Justice so he would know what's going on. And he said, no, we're not going to do anything about it. I agree with you. You're entitled to money, but we're not going to do anything about it. Okay. And then I called as a courtesy, the head of the California Judge Association. He was out. I said, well, I'm going to do something. I had a long talk with Steve Jar, talked to him. So I wrote the controller and said, on my judicial letterhead, I was an email, but I used the court computer and I identified myself. I'm talking about my pay. So it's not a personal grievance. It's about my pay as a judge. And to this day, I never heard from him, which I thought was rather poor on his part. Okay. When I was presiding judge or supervising judge, I answered every letter anybody wrote me. And basically, the controller ignored me. I thought for sure he'd just say, we got your email, we're looking into it or something, but he never got. So I decided to sue. So I need a lawyer, right? So my colleague, Justice Cheney, recommended Raul Kennedy and Skadden Arps. Skadden Arps, a huge firm. Raul Kennedy argued a big case in front of me, a class action case. So I talked to Raul Kennedy and I said, just so you'll know, here are my litigation goals. The judges get paid 100 cents on a dollar. They get interest at 10%, attorney's fees and costs under the private attorney general statutes. I want the judges to get all their pay. He said, okay. He said, well, we do it for nothing. I said, I don't want you to do it for nothing. They should pay. It's a private attorney general case. They ended up going ahead 5 years, over $1 million in fees. But anyway, so he said, okay. So I filed a lawsuit. I was the first in January of 2014. I was the named class action plaintiff. And then they started the attorney general, demurred, did this, just delayed, drug their heels, did whatever they could. So we won the first trial, hands down, boom, everything. Then, to a great shock to me, the California Judicial Association, I'll call it cahoots with the Department of Finance, amended the statute regarding judges' pay to say that any interest would be on a judge's salary claim would be at such and such a fund, which is 0.5% rather than 10%. Okay. Well, as you know, a 10% interest doubles every 7 years. All right. So this was a big, big amount. As it ended up, the interest was just about equal to the back pay.
Yep.
So the California Judge Association sent out this memo saying, we saved the day. We agreed to this to save the statute with automatic increases, not saying that we gave up what amounted to about, for me anyway, about $10,000 in interest. And maybe because I'm on the Court of Appeal, Superior Court judges would get a little less, but not that much less. So that kind of bothered me, more than bothered me, that the CJ would do that. And while the bill's pending, I was in communication with the Alliance, which is a rival group for the California Judge Association. We're trying to defeat the statute. I'm contacting LA's city councilman saying your pay is linked with the judges, so you ought to be worried about this. Contacted a retired supervisor to tell him the same thing. And I was told that the legislature said, well, the judges agreed to it, so we're not going to get involved. Okay, the judges being the California Judge Association. So the statute purported to strip the interest rate out. Okay. So I thought it was unconstitutional. I said so publicly. I said, every employee that sues for wages gets 10% penalties, except judges. Now, what's the justification for that? So we, in the first appeal, wanted to avoid 2 appeals if we could to get this thing done without 2 appeals. So my lawyers asked the Attorney General to brief the issue of the constitutionality of the statute so that we can get it done in the first appeal. So they agreed to do that. What they did was they raised the issue in a footnote. Okay, you don't raise an issue in a footnote according to appellate practice, rules, procedures, and whatnot. It's got to be in the body. It's got to have a separate chapter. It's got to, separate heading and everything. So the Court of Appeal in the decision ruled in our favor for all things and said, we're not deciding this because the Attorney General waived it by not raising it properly. Well, that was a bummer in my mind. Turned out it was a great deal because, well, I'll get to it in a minute. So then the time passes. The Attorney General does not ask for petition for review in the Supreme Court. So the appeal's final. We won. Yay. We go back to court and we just say, basically, where's the money? Okay, we don't raise any issues. We won everything. It's a final judgment. Where's the money? So they raise a whole bunch of arguments that have been decided, most of them have been decided against them in the first appeal, which you're not supposed to do that, We made a motion to dismiss the appeal as frivolous, but the court never ruled on it. But it was frivolous, all right? So we go through a second appeal, okay? Basically, no. The important thing is, when you went back to the trial court, the AG made all kind of arguments why we shouldn't get paid. They never raised the amendment knocking out the interest rate. They never raised it. Or we didn't raise it. wasn't ordered to raise anything. We had a final judgment. So in the second appeal, told my lawyers, I said, look, there's a principle on appeal that you decide issues on non-constitutional grounds if you can, and only if you can't do you do the constitutional issue. So I said, we should really push this waiver argument. The Court of Appeal said they waived it in the first appeal. That's final decision on the merits. They didn't raise it in the trial court. So we argued that, and the second appeal comes down, opinion comes down, finds waiver again, which is really great because had they reached the constitutional issue under past practice and protocol, the Supreme Court should review the case. Okay, anytime a statute is declared unconstitutional, it's a big deal, and you expect the Supreme Court to take it. Okay, but this case is not a big deal. It's just a waiver argument. All the other issues were decided in the first appeal. There is a rule that the Supreme Court can, in a second appeal, can go back and look at for important reasons or something. The issues were decided in the first appeal but weren't reviewed. But anyway, there's no reason for them to do this. This is just a run-of-the-mill case, no new press and no nothing. So I'm feeling real good about that. All right. So the Supreme Court this time, not the first time. I don't understand to this day why they didn't ask the first time for petition review. I don't understand to this day why they didn't raise the statute knocking our interest out properly in the first appeal or in front of the trial judge and went back. So, well, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Okay. Let me just collect myself here. All right. So, that's right. So the Supreme Court has 60 days to rule, okay? And I don't expect them to take the case because it's not important, okay? 60 days goes by. The court rule says if they don't decide in 60 days, it's automatically denied, okay? Yay, we won, right? No, we didn't, because they did a nunc-pro-tunc order after the 60 days ran and extended another, I think 30 days. They had a right within 60 days to do an extension of another 30 days, but they didn't do it within 60 days, okay? And that's not my understanding of what a nunc-pro-tunc order is, but who am I going to complain to? There's nobody over them.
They don't have anybody over them.
There's nobody over them, so that's their word. Okay, no, but then what they did was really threw me a curve. The whole court recused themselves for financial interest. Okay? Now, if they had a financial interest, so did the trial court judge, so did the Court of Appeal. Everybody had a financial interest.
It's the rule of necessity.
When the case started, back in January, Judge Burrell, who did a magnificent job, said, what about, isn't there a conflict? And both do I need a stipulation? And both the plaintiff, my lawyers, and the attorney general said, no. Under Olson versus Corey, it's rule of necessity. There's nobody else to hear it. Or there wasn't anybody else to hear it then, because 99% or so of the judges were affected. It was everybody that had been a judge before July 1, 2013. But 5 years later, they're basically saying the rule of necessity didn't apply. So we petitioned them and said, could you clarify this? Because if you got the rule of necessity here, and if you recuse yourself, how does that impact the trial judge and the Court of Appeal decided the case? Well, they didn't hear anything back from them. When they recused themselves, they appointed 6 judges to sit on the Supreme Court. There was a vacancy for some reason. They didn't apply for them. There were 6 sitting judges. They appointed 6 judges, none of whom had been on the bench more than a year, to sit on the Supreme Court to resolve this case for all purposes. Okay? So these 6 neophyte, that's a polite word. I mean, they're brand new judges. They're asked to decide this case, whether or not, who's going to get all their colleagues, 600 colleagues, are going to get basically a little over $20,000. And all retired people got a boost, in their retirement. The ones that were tied to the JRS-1 and the JRS-2 were impacted because anybody that retired after '08 would have got their base salary set. So, gee, what are these judges going to do? Okay. Well, the short of it is they denied the petition for a rehearing. Okay. The case is final. Hooray. This October, November or so. Okay. We go back to court and say, where's the money? And the controller said, we got limited staff and we might be able to pay. It'll take over a year to pay the judgment. Okay? Year and a half. Well, there's very little you can do against the state. Okay? You can't hold the state in contempt. You can't levy on the property. There's very little you can do. But it would kind of like if they didn't honor a final judgment, it'd be kind of a crisis, all right? I mean, a constitutional crisis. Anyway, so Judge Burrell on his own, we don't know. I don't know what to do. Judge Burrell says, okay, I'm going to entertain appointing an auditor to come in and tell the state controller how to do this right. In the meantime, the state controller is getting beat up in some newspapers because the judgment amounted to $40 million, and the interest is running at 10%. So she's getting a bunch of flack, and she's not the one I sued in the first place, okay? She's a successive controller. So we come up with somebody. In the meantime, the controller contacts a Sacramento firm, a politically connected firm, Manette Phelps, who had some experience in doing and handling this kind of thing, okay? And the controller files this response. When we filed, we had asked the court to appoint this person to do it, this company. It says, Manette Phelps says, give them a month or two and they'll tell us when they can pay, when the controller can pay. Just give us a month or two. So Burrell says, okay. So meanwhile, I recognize one of the names of the attorneys, which I'll kind of get back to in a bit, as somebody I've known for 25, 30 years, and I consider a good friend. And he's a real good guy. So they come in, Manette Phelps says, come in about, this is March, April, says, we can pay the judges by June, everybody else in August. Wow. Rather than a year or more, a year and a half. And they did it. So the judges got paid in June. The retired people got in June, the rest of the judges got in August. So we got paid, finally.
First week of August.
The guy, okay, the background is this. This is a long story now. The person that the controller contacted at Manette Phelps is an old friend, okay? I just call his first name Tom. I had met Tom 25 years earlier when his grandpa was my scoutmaster, took me up in the high Sierras for a month at a time. We were the first Boy Scout group to go on the John Muir Trail. So spent a lot of time with my scoutmaster. He's a great guy, took all his days, weekends, whatnot, camping, whatever. We'd take us down the beach and we all bought war surplus combat boots, for hiking boots. And we marched through the sand and get our feet toughened up in the boots. Anyway, he wanted me to meet his grandson who had just graduated from law school. So I got to know him, young man Tom, and we kept in touch. And at one time, Tom was a young associate. And he had to get a speaker for his law firm down in L.A. in West Side. So I said I'd do it for him. And he went and says, well, I got a speaker. Who's that? With the presiding judge of the Los Angeles Superior Court. Why'd you get him? He said, he's a friend of my grandpa's. So I kept in touch with this guy. Then he moves up to Sacramento to do some political stuff, okay? So when I'm trying to get appointed to the Court of Appeal for the first time, I called Tom and said, hey, Tom, can you help me? He says, well, it just so happens that Gray Davis is coming to my house tonight for a fundraiser, so yeah, I'll help you. Yeah, yes, I will help you. So that was he helped me with my appointment to the Court of Appeal. Well, what I last saw Tom at his mother's funeral. His mother went to grammar school 2 years ahead of me. And my best friend lived right next door to the scoutmaster and her. And so she's Tom's mother, great athlete. Anyway, I'm at her funeral and I'm talking to Tom, and he said, I got contacted by the controller on that case. And she said, well, I have this, I'm trying to pay these judges. And he says, would you take the case? And Tom told her, I'm not taking the case unless you can do the right thing and pay the judges. And the controller says, that's what I want. So that's kind of like a small world, I helped him out in his career. He helped me out twice. Okay. Small world. So everybody got paid. And I hope it doesn't happen again when the judges don't get paid. But if they do, maybe if they know about this, they'll listen to this, and it might give them some little help or clues or how I went about it. Not necessarily the right way, but it worked out okay for us. So I wanted to give that message out there.
To me, it always looked like it was a David and Goliath undertaking, and you prevailed as David.
Well, if I was David, I had these top-notch law firm, top-notch lawyers, so I never felt like.
But I mean, just to have the guts to undertake it when there was so much, flack on all sides from every direction on that thing. People were afraid. A lot of people are afraid that you shouldn't rock the boat, that things could get worse for the judges.
Well, that's right. Some people, I'm gonna make it worse for judges. The governor will get mad at us. He didn't. We're entitled to our pay. I don't care what he gets mad or not. It's not like we're asking for a raise. It's not like we're asking for something. We just want our back pay, okay? Which I thought was a legitimate request, and I would not shy away from asking or telling any employee.
With hindsight, everybody's for you now.
Okay, so that's about all I have to say. Other than I love being a judge, I love being on the Court of Appeal, and it was a great career.
Well, I think you're going to be remembered for more than the Mallano case, but the lawsuit's certainly a way to finish your career, I think, is doing something on behalf of the judiciary as a whole. And even though it started out as something you were personally confronted by, it ends up being something that affected everybody that was in this business.
Well, I was happy to do it for the other judges and especially for the widows. My secretary in the Court of Appeal, Carol Fieldhouse, was a widow of a Superior Court judge, and she got some money from it. And I know other widows of the Superior Court judges, and they got some money from it. So that made me feel happy.
Yeah. Well, you've had a great career in all respects, I would say, and certainly something about every stage of your life could be emulated by others with no regret.
Thank you, Rod. Thank you for your kind comments. Thank you for being my interviewer.
Well, a pleasure. I'm just happy to be able to do this, and I wish I could do better, but I'm glad that we had this talk, and I think I'm going to always cherish the time that we've had together.
Well, the feeling's certainly mutual.
Okay. Well, I guess this concludes the interview, and I wish you a happy day. I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Well, thanks, Roger.